Okay, welcome to Sexplorers. I'm Braxton Dutson with Birds and Beasts Podcast, joined with me and co-host Cami Hurst. How are you doing, Cami?
I'm good. Well, I'm so glad people are going to join us here on our Monday morning podcast, and we'll sexplore together.
Sexplore together. That's what I'm really excited about today, actually. So last week, and to give kind of a rundown, I think we talked a little bit about it, but it's a new show. Last week we did Sexy Book Club, which was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed Magnificent Sex. Cami, we decided on a book for next month, right?
Yeah. So for our readers or listeners, if they want to know what the format of the show is going to be, we're going to give you a little taste of something different each Monday. So last Monday was a book review we did, and then from then on, we're going to do some Q&A. We're going to do some mini presentations, and then we'll start over again with another book review. And so we've chosen for next month's book review the book No Bad Parts.
No Bad Parts.
By Schwartz, correct? I have to look behind me on my bookcase.
Richard C. Schwartz, yes.
Yeah, it's kind of an intro into internal family systems, but his work is incredibly applicable when we're talking about sexual shame or knowing our sexual self. So we take the internal family systems model and then use that for sexual issues. So the book doesn't directly talk about sexual issues, but it's a fantastic platform to use when looking at and exploring your sexual issues, whether it be shame or just isolation from your sexual self. Mm-hmm.
And everything that we're going to be talking about today, because today lands on me to be able to kind of guide the conversation around your sexploration. And so Cami and I are going to explore together and kind of support you in finding ways to explore beyond the physical, but we're going to also include the physical, because today I want to talk more about the four-dimensional wheel, and in particular on the four dimensions is what they are, how you can kind of compartmentalize them to be able to start exploring. So you're going to hear me use the word a lot today, just because I'm looking at the space of we're sexplorers. You're a sexplorer. You can start to do your own exploration as a sexual being on a spectrum of who you are. So that could be anywhere. Oh, keep going.
If viewers are wondering what I'm doing while we get this awesome mini lecture from Braxton, I'm going to manage the chat. So if you see me looking all around, I'm taking in our live comments from Facebook and YouTube and figuring out what would be helpful. So if you're like, what is Cami up to visually? I'm just going to be in the background managing and probably learning from Braxton today. He's a fantastic teacher.
I'm going to do that as well as Cami. I'm going to weigh on you on some of the thoughts that you've got too, because one of the things as I was putting this presentation together, one I wanted to know is I'd love to get comments from listeners, from viewers, to be able to know if the presentation format is applicable, if people like the visual behind it, or if they just like more of a lecture style. Second thing is, Cami, when I was looking through this exploration type of thing, I'm like, wow, I kept thinking of Manifest Destiny, if you will. It's like, what's out west? Who knows? let's figure this out. And the cool part was there wasn't, okay, you need to follow this trail. Eventually there was. But for trappers and when we're talking exploration, it was kind of find a way, follow water, kind of figure out the spaces and get to California. Mm-hmm. So in that spot, that kind of was thinking the same way when it comes to exploration of our sexual self. Now we have a lot of resources, but we also have a lot of places you can go with a lot of information. So I'm going to actually start sharing this. So Cami, any information that you have put in or anything that you feel like people you've worked with or ideas that you have, please jump in on each one of these segments or each one of these parts of the four-dimensional wheel.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. So Sexploring, where do we go? Where do we start? That's kind of the question I get a lot of individuals asking me when they're saying, well, I want to know more about my sexual self. So oftentimes I start hearing that they start to explore, or they want to explore with maybe I keep going back to Cosmopolitan, magazines like that, Men's Magazine, where there is a very prescriptive, this is what you do to experience optimal sexual health, optimal sexual experiences. And as much as the prescriptive sounds great, take this, call me in the morning, and let me know how it worked. That method isn't as great when it comes to exploration, as well as to find optimal sexual experiences. What that typically follows is, oh, that didn't work for me. And because it didn't work for me, maybe I'm broken. Maybe I'm bad. Right?
Yeah.
So
Tons of messages that like one size fits all, and that just isn't true or helpful.
No, it's not. Which, as we were starting with this, I thought it was awesome because the Sexplorers podcast, Birds and Bees podcast, and Sex Therapy 101 are all great resources on where you can get more information on sexual health as a parent, sexual health as a person, and now here you're watching and listening to us when it comes to being an explorer. So find multiple avenues of getting information, and then recognize where that information is coming from and who you're getting that information from, because there's a lot of people that'll tell you the way. And I often encourage people to hesitate a little bit when someone says, I've got it figured out, because they may have it figured out for themselves. Great on them, but that doesn't mean they've got it figured out for you.
Yeah.
So one of the things I want to start out with is the first word that comes up oftentimes, like, I want to improve intimacy. Well, intimacy is not 007's code word for sex.
It's often used that way, though, right? Yeah, when people
Oh,
are scared to say sex, they use the word intimacy.
all the time. All the time. I would say that in my sessions, that comes up all the time. Like, well, we were intimate. And I'm like, and what does that mean? Because intimacy is essentially vulnerability, closeness, being able to experience someone. And that doesn't mean that you interacted with genitals. It doesn't mean that there was a sexual experience per genitalia or in this physical sense. You can have a very intimate moment with someone, not touching and just staring into their eyes. In fact, for some people, that can be even more uncomfortable or more intimate than sex itself. Have you heard that before,
You
Cami?
can have sex and it not be intimate at all. There's tons of bad sex people are having. So it's not intimate at all.
Absolutely. So when I'm thinking of intimacy, looking into intimacy, the physical connection, first off, wording is really important. The language we're using, I want to be intimate. Well, what do you want in intimacy? That's a great umbrella term. Now let's start digging down a little bit more into what you want to experience, or what you don't know that you want or don't know that's there. So when I'm using the word intimacy, or when you hear me talk today, you're going to hear me say things like sexual connection, intercourse, or sexual experiences. And when I'm talking sexual experiences, just to define things, is that is an agreed upon sexual experience. That could be anywhere ranging from making out, kissing, holding hands, all the way to penetrative sex in one degree or another, or just the way that you prefer sexual experiences. And all of them can be wonderful and great. So know that if I use the word intimate, that is not meaning, here's that code word for sex.
It's your code word for connection and closeness and vulnerability. And yes,
Absolutely.
All the good stuff that can come from a sexual or non-sexual experience with someone.
Absolutely. So one of the ways I like to view this is Dr. Gina Ogden. She
This is good stuff, Braxton. I'm so excited. Yes.
Oh, I love that you love it, Cami, because this is one of the things that when I'm talking with clients or even individuals, when I'm not a therapist, I've moved into thinking this way of human experience through these 4 dimensions and how they all connect and how they're all individual and separate and they move, and it's a beautiful circle and kind of an X right now, but man, each one of these quadrants could be really big or really small and almost seem non-existent and anywhere in between, which gets me really excited to think like you can adjust and change, and it's constantly living and flowing like you are as a person.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at these at this four-dimensional wheel, Dr. Ogden, she was working with some shaman in Peru, and essentially had came across this. She was looking into her history, so her ancestry, and was getting in touch with that, and found this method of life was this four-dimensional wheel, and ended up with permission bringing this back into more of the Western experience to try and bring this into a conceptualization of how to address human sexuality. So she was a sex therapist and sex researcher, and realized that in the 60s, most of the sexual expression and research was being focused mainly on male-bodied individuals,
Mhm.
orgasm and sex based on a male person. And
Mhm.
so she put together one of the biggest female focused sexual research to find out what women want, or not necessarily like what do you want, but what is sex like?
Yeah, what's same? What's different? Can we use the
Yes.
male experience broadly or not? Yeah.
Because they were mostly focused on, did you achieve an orgasm? Did you this? Did you that? And was finding that women were saying, well, it, yeah or no, but I had this other, worldly experience almost, or I left my body, or I felt this, or I felt so much shame, or I felt we had this whole spectrum of experience during sex that was not being told through, did you get wet? Did you have an orgasm? Okay, that was a successful sexual experience because that was typically based on how male-bodied individuals said it. Did I get an erection? And did I have an orgasm?
Really
And
rooted in the physical function of sex rather than these other three. What was your emotional experience, your spiritual experience, your mental experience?
absolutely. And so it was based solely on a performance model, really. And that's how
Mhm.
the research was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So seeing this, she's like, we're missing spiritual. We're talking physical and in so many ways, and sometimes on the mental, but we are missing this emotional, and very much so this spiritual. In fact, the one of the quotes that she consistently said was people were stating like, exclaiming, "Oh my God," or "I felt like I was one with God," or "I felt like," and it was like this spiritual experience they were having. So she decided to start looking into this, and this four-dimensional wheel was one way that she started putting this together, and the stories started coming out so much more robust than what the
Mhm.
research was bringing.
Mhm.
So I'm going to start with it. We're going to start with the physical side of things. So you can see here at the bottom, we've got our physical story, and down there at the bottom side of the wheel, we're going to start there. So this is a form of I sense. You might hear people or yourself saying things like this, like, ouch, there's a physical response there, or don't stop. Or that's a turnoff, or I'm so hot for you, or that's so good. I like that feeling. You may experience a physical response, you may not. But in these senses, when we are stepping into the physical quadrant, we are stepping into everything physical that you experience, not just what's going on with your genitals. So, Cami, I'm curious for you. When you think of the physical quadrant, what are things that you think of, or that when you start to encourage people to explore, what are some of the things that you explore on the physical side with them, or encourage them to experience?
Mhm. Well, I think in the last 100 years, sex as a sensual experience, meaning using our senses to enjoy something, has been reduced to what our skin feels and what our eyes see. So,
Mm,
really, really kind of diminished um, in the last 100 years where something looks hot, but we don't really talk about how things smell or how things sound, and using all of our senses in a physical experience that way. And I think it gets us into trouble when maybe um, we age and we don't look like we did the day we met. And we're reliant on a physical cue for what's high or a visual cue for what's high. And maybe we have some hangups about using our mind to fantasize about how we used to look or how we want to look, right? So I see all these barriers where maybe we've boiled down the physical experience to, is my body responding well? And do I like what I'm physically seeing with my eyeballs? And we're leaving out our other senses. What about temperature? What about smell? What about pressure? And the way we are touching each other's skin. And so it's almost like we forget that we have all these senses we can use in a physical experience. And it gets really reduced to, how do my genitals feel, and what do I like what I'm seeing with my physical eye? And I'm like, whoa, we have so many senses we could be using here to improve the physical experience. So I'll talk about that. And often that kind of blows people's mind to talk about all these other senses we can use.
Oh, I love that, Cami. Absolutely. When it gets reduced to what we're doing on a physical sense of, again, what do I put my genitals, or what goes in, or what do I put my genitals into? That is one physical side of sexual expression, which is great. That's great. It typically is all that's focused on. So if you're a person that's saying, well, I want to explore, oftentimes the exploring starts in the physical realm of, well, what touch do you like? Which is a great thing to explore. But at the same time, we also need to go with what, like, people will they'll get a visceral response of, oh, that gets exciting, and I feel that in my chest, or, ooh, oh, I get this sense of disgust, or this feeling of like a physical response there. What brings relaxation? And I love, Cami, you're talking about, well, what brings relaxation in, like, your smell? Like, smells for me, holy cow, if I smell sandalwood or lavender, oh,
Mm-hmm. Those are good for you. Those are on your template.
They're on my template.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a relaxation sensation for me. That's not even something that, like, sandalwood gets me fired up, turned on, and ready to go. It's
right.
I relax when I smell that. Or copal. There's an incense that smells just like, it just takes me to a place on the beach. Even as I'm talking about it, I'm like, oh, I'm over on the California Big Sur, just seeing over the ocean. That
physical sense creates an emotional experience for you with sandalwood and leather.
Yes.
Not leather. You said lavender.
Well, leather does the same thing.
Okay, yeah.
Cami, how do you know me? Leather's awesome too. But that's one aspect of relaxation. So explore with you what sights, what smells, what lighting, what sense of touch. I love that you're talking about touch, temperature, and pressure, that all of those are things that you can start exploring. And if you're really nervous about a sexual experience, having a partner, or even just enjoying yourself, of what kind of touch, texture, and pressure you like to experience, from having a scalp massage to, even as we look at massages, we like to get certain levels of massage. So these physical sides of things, recognize and have levels that you're not moving into an actual sexual experience. Like when we're talking like genital experiences, or what you might say like oral sex, anal, vaginal, or anything along those lines, that typically leads to what we'd say, or what society would put in there as a sexual experience on the physical side. If you can give yourself some place to relax into a physical sense of, this is okay. I'm here to explore, not to perform. That can be really helpful.
Really underrated. When I talk about the difference between a sensual experience and erotic experience, I have a lot of clients who haven't explored that idea, where they just like intimacy must mean sex, sensual must mean erotic. And it's like, whoa, can we back up and just figure out how our body is a vehicle for pleasure? And just let's deep dive into that without eroticism for a while. Let's figure out how your body is a vehicle for pleasure using your senses. And that can blow people's minds, because they're like, no, the point of sensuality is to get to an orgasm. It's like, whoa, okay, hold on. We're missing half the experience. Yeah.
Yep. Want that bullet train to, like, this is where it is. And that's the scary part too. Some want that. And others are like, if I give this hug, we're on the bullet train to sex, and I don't want sex.
Yeah. So it creates a lot of avoidance. It can create avoiding sensualness, because you don't want it always to lead to eroticism.
No, you don't. So in this, I started putting together the exploring versus what society's prescription is. So burning through these, the societal prescription is you do more. All you've got to do is go to the grocery store and you can look at the 500 or the 200 ways to blow her mind, his mind, whatever. It depends on the magazine you're looking at. But this is what you do. Do more if you want to have a good sexual experience. Planned sex is the worst because if it's planned, then that means that you're boring or you've lost the spark or it's just going to be rote and the same thing over and over again. And that is not, doesn't have to be accurate, but that is a thing that people avoid. Sexy bodies equals good sex. If you're really, really ripped and you've got big boobs or a big butt, or you've got these assets of
decade, because the last decade they were different and the next decade it's going to be different, and so we're never going to win. But there is that idea, sexy bodies equal good sex, and that doesn't line up at all with my clinical experience anecdotally. I don't know if it does for you, but
no, it doesn't. Some people, but the main thing is, what do you enjoy? Every person may find someone sexy in a different way, but it's whether it's talking about what your body is doing, there's a lot of focus on that. Big penis, big breasts, it's small stomach, 36, 24, 36.
Not true, and it's not helpful.
No.
Yeah.
And then good sex comes naturally. You just kind of naturally go into it. And that's not usually the case either. This is a learned skill.
Yeah.
And then the ability is the measure. So if you can perform with an erection, if you do get wet on your own, if you have the ability to experience sensation in all of your limbs, if you are able-bodied, if you aren't, if you can stand, if you're not in a wheelchair, all these different things, is that there's a certain level of physique and ability that gets focused on heavily versus saying all these other things. Disability.
I brought that up because there's so much ableism in sex and sexual messaging, and we erase a whole experience of a large segment of people who are sexual, and we don't have enough representation. We kind of assign asexuality orientation to anybody who might not be as able-bodied as we think someone needs to be. To have an enjoyable life and to have an enjoyable sex life. And it's incredibly misinformed.
Absolutely. And from our book last week, Magnificent Sex, they were saying that actually individuals who were perceived with a disability actually ended up having more magnificent sex because they were already very learned or able to communicate needs and changes.
More comfortable with adaptation. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really important to look into. So when we're exploring on the physical side of things, so all the things we just talked about that aren't society prescription, but moving into environment, like what is the medication doing for you? If you're experiencing medication, how does it affect you as a person? That physically brings things up. Read books, explore a little bit more on what things you might be interested in. There's books on methods and different messages of masturbation, on almost sensate focus, like what you're talking about, touch, texture, and pressure. What things are stimulating? Are there pictures? Are there smells? What things relax you? Is there laundry next to your bedside that continues to turn you off? Do you have a picture of your mother-in-law hanging around the room? What things could possibly be putting a brake on your physical experience? Other things is putting focus back on the pleasure and fun, like having fun in the bedroom, having fun outside of the bedroom. How are you guys passing each other in the hall? How are you guys joking with each other? Is there an ease or is there a tension? And how can we reduce the tension and increase the ease?
Yeah, I do a lot of assignments with couples on finding their fun again and their flirtiness with a hard stop it. This isn't going to go anywhere sexual, that we're going to just remember how to play together. And I do a lot of assignments like that with couples for sure.
Oh, I love that, Cami. That's so great. Because we do need to. We need to be able to do to find other ways of interaction. Sex is not this unique thing on the outside that is just, oh, now we get into the physical side. Although often it is viewed that way or engaged that way. So finding other physically connecting activities is great. Planning for spontaneity. Thursdays, 3 p.m. You and I are going to have a sexual experience together, and let's show up and see where things go. We can have spontaneous sexual experiences while we've also planned it in our day.
I know, I was so hung up on that idea that people are so resistant to planning for sex. But then when they talk about their most romantic experiences, it always highlights the effort the other person put into it. And so I'm like, where is this messaging coming from? Because your most memorable experiences or romantic gestures were like really planned and detailed, and you were just the one who was surprised about it. And so this idea that we don't plan sex, it's like, how about one person plans it, you take turns planning, and the other person's surprised? Because most of your memorable experiences, you're like, oh, that meant so much to me. You put so much effort into that. Yeah. But with sex, we don't have the same thing of thank you for putting so much effort into that for me. It should be the same.
So much. And I think one of the hard parts here is that we are inundated with everyone being so sexual on TV that it's just this natural thing, from movies to music videos to the way that songs are written. I listen to songs all the time and I'm like, that's just not how things happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great and all, but it's just not. Sorry. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I mean, especially because I like listening to country music. I start listening to country music and I'm like, man, there's a lot of tin roofs around here that people are in the rain with.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever been in the rain under a tin roof.
And then laying in the hay, that gets itchy after a minute. So.
Yeah, I have no hay fantasies. Sorry. That might be TMI, but absolutely not for me. For some, yes. Some people, for sure.
Yep.
Not for me.
Yep, not yucking anyone's yum. It's just that but it's sung so constant. It's like, oh, why don't I make love under a tin roof? Like, do you have tin roofs around? I don't know. Maybe. But then going into foreplay versus core play, this is, I don't even know where this exactly comes from, other than I hear Kristen Hodson talking about it all the time. Mm-hmm. But the foreplay starts right after your last sexual encounter ends. Cuddling, kissing, connecting, doing the dishes, speaking with each other, expressing gratitude, love, support. Now, those are going to move more into the emotional side of things, but it's important to take this into consideration that foreplay is continuously happening, the fun, the engagement. Core play is what we're doing when we're moving towards an agreed upon sexual experience, maybe to achieve an erection or to engage in a certain way or to achieve a goal of being really close while we're naked or for an orgasm. That's core play.
I get frustrated with the idea that people will talk about foreplay as if it's everything that happens before intercourse. Mm-hmm. And for those people who experience very few to little orgasms, that foreplay is the main event. And if you have a partner who struggles with orgasm, being elusive, you need to switch your mindset that that's the main event for them, even if it's not for you. So let's make it spectacular instead of an afterthought.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm going to keep going to music. Music's my jam. But Jason Derulo has a song where at one point in time he's like, let's get down to business and skip foreplay. AA. I'm like, every time I hear him sing,
I just like AA.
AA. But he goes over this so much. Like, the whole thing is about how, like, let me show you that we don't even need to, like, let's get down to business. We are getting to the what I'm assuming is the penetrative sex. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to show you just how good of a time you can have. We're going to skip foreplay. Like, we don't even need to build up. You're going to want this so much, or whatever it is. I'm like, ow. Not hearing lube, not hearing all these other things that could possibly be used in order to skip foreplay.
Right, because we know through science that foreplay is what allows for penetration to be pleasurable for a female-bodied individual. Like, the vaginal canal increases in length by 1/3 if we have enough foreplay that's actually arousing. sex for a female bodied individual without any foreplay, if there's absolutely no arousal, that is not going to be a main event for most women.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And I also would say that
the body hasn't even had time to accommodate or get ready for that to be pleasurable.
one thing I think is really important for to be able to recognize is that oftentimes, especially for the male individuals that I work with, there's a thought that you need to know, and that you be essentially that you're acting on a partner, whether it's a male partner or even a female partner, that is like, I need to know. And so I get to that thing to provide pleasure. I'm a good lover, so I make orgasm happen, or I do this, or this is the thing. And so all of a sudden your partner becomes this actionable item that you're acting upon. And they may or may not like the experiences that you're giving to them. Follow their lead and ask their experiences versus going in as an expert. If we can change that level, you can really become a wonderful lover and learn a whole lot about a person, because each person is going to be very different for that foreplay. Don't go into a prescriptive experience.
Yeah, I almost hear you saying, that if you're trying to become or increase your confidence in am I a good lover, to instead of making that a problem to be solved, realizing there's a person to be loved in front of you.
Love that. Oh,
yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And Cami, I'm recognizing as we go through this, with the time you and I could talk about just each one of these quadrants, I'm like,
I should have asked you how many slides you got, man.
I have a lot.
Go for it. We're gonna now do speed round for the next.
I was like, we're gonna go speed. Okay, a lot. I've got 14, and not all of them have to be discussed, but well, most of them. But so now we're gonna move over into the emotional quadrant. So while we're gonna do this, maybe this is just something we'll have to do some callbacks to. We can revert back to this, and then listeners, if you have questions, if you're like, whoa, you guys burned through that one too fast, what the heck? Let us know what you want to know more about, and we can do more time on these.
Yeah, these chats are live, so if you're on Facebook or YouTube, post a comment. Even right now, we're going to keep them. We're going to come back to them. We're going to answer your questions live, so use that comment box.
Absolutely. So I feel the emotional side of things. This is as deep as the ocean, and it's just as vast. There's so many emotions we can experience beyond happy, sad, glad, and angry. But some of these can come up. We could be angry, sad, happy. We can have is what she would refer to, what Dr. Ogden would refer to as oh my gosh, a heartgasm. I just feel so much for you. It just feels so good. A heartgasm.
I love that, a heartgasm.
Yeah. And even this one here at the bottom, you're scary, like Uncle Fred, like that. An association, a connection to that, or to experiencing something so much, we can experience a ton. And I like this.
Mm-hmm.
I love the picture here of all the possible emotions this person may be going through. And it's even more vast than that. So recognize we're talking about a sexual experience and feeling. Again, the prescriptions can be, the emotions are okay sometimes. It's weird to cry. It's weird to laugh. It's weird to this. It should be this very sexual experience, from maybe animalistic, as I've heard it described, to loving and caring. And that's kind of the window you've got. But there's so much more to it. Do you have thoughts on this, Cami?
Yeah, I think something that was unusual to me to learn in my human existence and emotions that could be felt was, there was a time when I was taking care of my dad as he was passing away from stage 4 melanoma. And it was the first time I realized, oh, we can have sad sex and it can be comforting. And that was a new and different, because that experience to me was new and different. Taking care of someone as they died, that was my first real intimate experience with death. And it was really new and interesting to me to come home and learn a new side of sex and the emotion I could feel. I thought that was outside of bedroom. Sad and grief over death didn't seem like something that was really sexy. But it was incredibly intimate, incredibly comforting, and kind of blew my mind to, oh my gosh, there's all these ways that we can experience intimacy and sexuality and emotions. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, because that's a beautiful example of just I hear this frequently from clients I work with is I didn't think that there was place for that in
Yeah.
sex.
Yeah.
The sadness, excitement, joking, laughing, uh,
Mhm.
complete despair, pain,
Mhm.
all of these can come up. And especially when it comes to societal gendered emotional expressions. Holy cow, if I encouraged a male-bodied person to cry during or after sex when they felt that way, yeah, no, that's not something that's ever been put into a place of it being okay. And even with female-bodied people, you often hear how that can be weird or odd. But
And
wow,
I'd ask, what did the tears mean? Because there can be tears that were, I hated that. I felt you didn't see me, or there could be tears that were, that was really beautiful. I did feel seen. And so it's, what did those tears mean?
and we're looking at vulnerability in so many ways, very often, and from the magnificent sex. Then that's when there's magnificent sex, the way that we're talking about in the book is that being able to explore just what those, yeah, like you said, the emotions, what they mean,
Mhm.
can bring so much more depth to it.
We've
So
got
I'm
a
like,
chat question. Do you want me to throw it up there?
yeah, I'd love to.
All right. So what about when one partner's okay opening up emotionally during sexual experiences and the other doesn't? The vulnerability seems challenged and trust starts to feel challenged.
Absolutely. When one person's opening up and it's not being met in that same way. Absolutely. So when that experience comes up, because it does, you start to one person becomes more vulnerable during a sexual experience, and then it's like, oh, I feel alone in this. My partner's not meeting me on that same level. Um, and then yes, the trust of like, well, are you going to come here with me? Is that
Mhm.
am I here alone on this? And that can feel very alone and ostracizing. Again, this comes back to the big emotions that could be experienced during that time, and that may be that there needs to be a pause in the sexual experience, depending on the intensity of the
Right.
vulnerability. Oftentimes, I do encourage, depending on the intensity, you got to read the situation. But after the sexual experience, maybe depending on when you're experiencing the sexual response, is having a conversation outside of the bedroom, outside of that vulnerable space, so it's not as raw, it's not as big, and we can start coming back to, hey, what I noticed in this experience is that I felt very vulnerable, and I'm not I was having a hard time feeling felt or feeling seen in that same vulnerable space, to see if your partner would be able to meet you in that space outside of the sexual experience. Now, this is going to depend vastly when it comes to your partner, how much trust you already have in the relationship. If you've got trust, if that's been hurt before,
Yeah, it's probably
um,
not realistic to expect sexual trust if there aren't other forms of strong trust. That's kind of where my mind went is, well, does this individual have a hard time opening up emotionally in general? Or is it just sexually? Do they have a hard time opening up to just you? Or is it others? Like I would get real clear about the context and about maybe what the person is anxious about, what will happen if I open up. And we role play. I'll have people role play through that and even pretend like, let's role play a fake emotional experience. What are you scared might be happen if you share that? And make sure that there's social safety there, that whatever comes up in sexuality, you can receive it without ostracism or being upset or
I love that. Yeah, those. This is a great question that Peter poses. Is that being in this space? It's again quite a big spectrum, from very, very uncomfortable inability to be vulnerable with each other or one person with the other, which could be developed from trauma. And there needs to be work maybe on the therapeutic side of things. Sometimes people just need permission or some suggestions on how to be vulnerable and to be open with each other, experiencing openness outside of the bedroom, as Cami was talking about that, and even having those conversations to keep developing that vulnerability and trust outside and in sexual experiences. So sometimes a therapist can be really helpful in that area. Other times, it's having more and more of those experiences outside and developing that trust in other ways. Main part is you need to make sure that you stay safe on the emotional level. And we want to be uncomfortably uncomfortable when we're moving those spaces, but not being overwhelmed, because that can create more distress than what we're really wanting.
Discomfort for growth, but not discomfort to be broken or
Yes,
create new harm. Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you, Cami. And great question. Thank you for putting those out there. So when we're exploring, asking open-ended questions can be really helpful. What emotions are there that I'm not seeing? How do I build this type of connection? What is bringing yourself emotionally to the table mean? And then expressing vulnerability and gratitude can be really helpful in building connection and identifying what things are really close and working for the relationship in that situation. So let me jump over to the mind, and I think this is where I spend most of my time with my clients.
What's happening in the mind? Yeah.
What's going on in the mind? The big things. I shoulda. I'm confused. What if? What a great idea. We did what? Let's make a plan. Good girls don't. Good boys don't. Should we get married? I like that one that comes up. But a big part of the mental story is the shoulds. And it is what should I be? What should I want? How should I express myself? Is that okay? Is this not okay? Oh, that's pervy. There's judgments. Anywhere that we can start finding a judgment, or the way that you should be. I should be thin. I should be big. I should be small. I should be sexual. I should last for 20 minutes. All these shoulds can roll into the experience, and that's all up in the mental quadrant. We don't talk about what we want. We don't talk about how the experience is, because that will ruin it. We don't ask for consent. We don't engage in consent. That would ruin the situation. Asking what's next. And then this isn't okay for me to want is another one. It's like, it's not even having permission to be and want yourself. So to explore yourself, I encourage being able to go to, who is the person I'm with? Who is this person? Who am I? And how do I become uniquely vulnerable? Like tolerating the discomfort, asking questions, understanding, and then being able to calm anxieties through taking deep breaths, through being able to develop that trust, as we were talking a little bit earlier with the question that came in. Being playful and honoring past trauma, recognizing, hey, this may be hard and I want to engage or explore this, but this is difficult. I often think of this one as, if you've got settlers coming across the plains and they see a mountain, it's like, how are we going to ever get over that? And it's like, you keep working at it little by little, and you find a path and get through it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this one in of itself is something that we need to talk about, and we will talk about as time goes on, just because the mental quadrant comes up so much.
Yeah, our brains are our biggest sex organ. I mean,
oh yeah,
you could be doing everything right below the belt and not get any traction if things aren't optimal mentally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether it's just a lack of education or some sex negativity, or you are a mystery to yourself, like you are not your own expert. There's so much that influences our sexual experience that comes from this mental story we have about sex, about our body, about our partner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the mind that comes, the mental side of things that can come up, that typically I see start to swirl with the emotional one, is I want this, or I'm interested in this, and I fear rejection, and I fear not being connected, or I fear that that's wrong. And then that jumps back to the mental, and it continues this loop of, I should be a different person, or should want something different, so I'm not rejected, or I don't feel these negative feelings. So we try and fix them, and then fixing them means you're broken, which feels really sad, disgusting, or difficult. There's an emotion that's tied to that, which jumps back to fixing, and we keep going with this cycle in between those two quadrants. And typically the physical body starts to feel a reaction to that, and it all gets affected.
You're going to start feeling anxious and turn inward, and those aren't great experiences. Those don't pair well with sex for an optimal experience.
Yeah, not at all. So there's more to this, but we're going to jump, because I know we're getting closer on time. So I want to jump to the spiritual quadrant. Now, spiritual quadrant, and I say the word spirit, I have a lot of people that are like, church. Can mean church. It can.
It can, not always.
But religion does not have the only grasp hold on this word spiritual. So I wanted to find that one. I wanted more into the side of connection. Now, that's the other part. It's like this works well with religion in the sense that connection with deity, God, gods, connection with a community, a congregation, connection with yourself and your own experience of how you connect with nature, how you connect with the deity. But all these different things, especially when we're talking about sex too, like this means so much to me. Maybe this relationship, maybe this one night stand means so much to me. Our souls are dancing. This is where people started to, in the research, they followed through with words that were like, how do we put this into research terms? Our souls were dancing. I felt one.
And yeah, I lost time and place for a moment. I was transported somewhere else. Yeah, those are all very spiritual terms, but not necessarily religious. I know lots of religious people who are not spiritual, and I know lots of spiritual people who are not religious. And really, yeah, we're going for this more, not mystical, but this experience of something greater, that we're just a drop in the bucket, that we're lost in. I can't come up with another word, but transcendence. I'm going to need a thesaurus.
Transcendence is a great word when it comes to it. Like being in that space. And even in this other one, that I'm so lonely. Have you ever felt that way before? Like if you ask yourself, man, sometimes I feel really lonely.
Yeah.
And even going into the place with the question that came up earlier, like I was vulnerable and my partner didn't meet me, and I felt all these emotions, but maybe that tied right into that spiritual side of things, which is I was looking for a really deep connection in this feeling, and I'm here alone, and I feel so lonely.
Make us feel alone in the world, alone in the universe.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times we're looking at societal prescriptions. We're looking at, it's affecting their religious experience. Oftentimes sexual expression has been prescribed depending on how I've lost the word.
Orthodox.
Thank you. How orthodox your religious experience, or how orthodox the religion that you attend. Yeah. Depending on how orthodox it is, the more prescriptive sex typically is. So that can create a story of what is an appropriate connection, what's not. Again, that starts to go into the shoulds and the emotion and the physical and the spiritual. We see how fast we can start really pulling in those different quadrants. We're avoiding connecting activities, connecting with God, connecting with a deity or a nature, and then oftentimes encouraging isolation from a partner. Don't get too invested; you could get hurt. Don't put yourself out there too much, because that could create pain and rejection. I'm a failure, nobody wants me. That one steps into the mental quadrant as well, but the thought that is, no one wants me. There's no connection. I often hear couples talk about feeling as though that they're ships in the night or best friends, especially when it's sexual.
Comes up in my office all the time. I'm like, pick another word.
Pick another word. That isolation, that loneliness can come in pretty heavy. And that's like, well, that's just what happens after 5 years, 10 years, 25 years of marriage, or being with a partner. So exploring, if you're wanting to explore this, being able to bring up what brings me connection. What maybe we tap into some of these other things. What is connection to me? How do I feel connection? And when I feel that way, what does it feel like, is a great way to explore. And you may not have an answer to that. And that's where exploring can be. Like, how do you get sexual health answers from a deity? That's not often taught in any of the religions or experiences that I know of. What feels fulfilling to you? How do you feel connection? What is a fulfilling sexual experience for you? And honoring that. Understanding that it's not going to come all at once. That just as much as having a religious or a spiritual experience doesn't necessarily make you one with the universe or transcends you into the presence of a God. It's all pieces by pieces and connection in these other ways.
Yeah, and I think something that really gets in the way of this spiritual story of using the spiritual side of ourself sexually is this real difficult idea of seeing the body as good and seeing pleasure as good, because rooted in a lot of religious and non-religious spiritual sects, there's a strong narration of sacrifice, a strong narration of self-deprivation, a strong sense of the body getting in the way of what our spirit wants to experience. And so becoming friends with your body as part of your spiritual story, I've seen become really transformative for people's sexual experiences.
Ooh, I love that. Love that. Being able to explore what spirituality means to you and your authentic self. I mean, that's a journey in of itself.
Mm-hmm.
But to then bring that into sex, what kind of connection are you seeking?
Mm-hmm. Do you believe your body can be good? Do you believe your body can, do you have a right to pleasure? Is pleasure beautiful, or is it distracting you from your ultimate purpose? Making peace with this body and peace with pleasure is a spiritual endeavor to me.
Absolutely. And each person's so unique that it's going to be your history plus what you're experiencing now, plus what you think you want to experience. And that's the beautiful part of exploration. Where have we been? Where do we think and where do we want to go? And where am I right now? And what seems to be a cool path? And how do I chart that? Is essentially when we're looking at exploring and sexploring, we're figuring out which way to go. And know that all of these are not individual by themselves. They can be to a certain extent, like we can focus on them, but look at how they all connect in the center. They all affect each other and they all create a part of a whole, just like you are. So, whoops, I screwed that up when it comes to the infertility. This is a slide that I really like when it comes to when I'm talking with individuals during infertility, because all these things are placed into it. And so I stole that slide over, but I forgot to change that. But remembering why you are together, you and this person, you and yourself, you and your deity, you and this body and soul. Why are you together? You may not know that, or maybe you do. Being able to talk, check in, set boundaries, get a win-win, get time-oriented. What things do you want to experience? What is the vulnerability you want to have? What holds them back? What holds you back? What launched you forward, and how do we continue that? All of those curiosity questions are wonderful to bring in. We want to focus on pleasure as well as your environment, your medications, the books that you're reading, the reminders that you put in your phone. If you've got a picture of your mother-in-law in your room and you're trying to have sex with her looking at you, that might be turning you off. Like, look at all these different things in your room that could be, or in the environment that could be affecting you and you not quite knowing that. And then I highly encourage play with each other and play with yourself, like in multiple ways. But find ways.
That should be our tagline. Play with yourself.
Explorers play with themselves.
Yeah, and look in all these quadrants about yourself. If you're looking to become more of an expert about yourself, this 4D model, Braxton, I love it. I'm so glad that you taught us all about this thing that Gina Ogden brought from Peru with permission to share how their culture looks at identity and how we can overlay that into our sexual identity. And this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Cami. I love this as a first kind of a run through of, like, I'm recognizing just how in depth. I was like, I don't know if I've got enough for a full hour. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, we did.
I could have cut a lot of that. Yes, great question. We just got a question on here of, will this be recorded to watch later? It's currently being recorded, which is awesome.
Yeah, so these will all be able to play back on our YouTube channel. I think also on our Facebook pages, but we'll have to make sure it should be.
Yes, last week's, it showed up on my Facebook page and you could rewatch the whole live session. So it comes across as a Facebook Live, but any and all of these are being recorded. You can go to Sexplorers at YouTube or on YouTube and watch them via YouTube. You can watch them on each of ours. So we've got this going to Dr. Cami Hurst's Facebook page and Braxton Dutson's Facebook page. So yes, great question. So glad that you're here watching and that you joined us for the time, Kelly.
Mhm.
And everyone else. We had multiple viewers on here, which is so fun to engage with you and to talk about this.
Yeah, we're so glad that you guys will come along on this journey with us as we Sexplore on Monday mornings together at 9 a.m. Mountain.
Yeah, and so when it comes to next week, Cami's going to have something similar to this. Again, we're playing with the format on what's going to be most supportive, and we're exploring just as alongside you guys, just in a way of how to get this conversation and experience to you, as well as how this works for the both of us. So we're excited to be along with you.
And every couple weeks, we're going to do listener questions or viewer questions. So you can email those to us at sexplorerspodcast@gmail.com, or you can drop them in a comment, and we'll add those to the list of questions we're going to address in the Q&A episodes.
Yep. And always know that that Cami and I, we do presentations individually, as well as I'm sure we'd be open to doing a combined one. That'd be fun. Could you imagine live, you, me, same room? We'd have a good time.
We have a good time. And we each have, courses. We're each therapists who in private practice. So there's a lot of ways to access us or utilize us. And this is one way we're trying to move the needle towards sexual health. So.
Yes. Well, wonderful. I think that does it for today, at least for me. Anything else from you, Cami?
No, that's it for
Okay.
me. So we'll see you guys next Monday.
See you next Monday. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.